This is Chapter 9, Section 2, Labor Market Trends. I would recommend that as we are going through today's information that you take notes so you'll have the information for later for your test and also for the check for understanding at the end of this lesson. Labor market trends. Certain things we're going to talk about today are tracking the labor force and discussing what exactly labor force is. A place that tracks labor force is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also known as the BLS, and we'll look at that as well today. Labor force is all non-military people who are employed or unemployed, and people outside the labor force are not counted. So anybody who would not be old enough to be employed, obviously, would not be counted in these numbers. Somebody who has a disability and unable to work also would not be counted. So employment, we need to define what employment actually means. People who are 16 or older who meet one of the following. They either worked at least 1 hour for pay within the past week, they worked 15 or more hours without pay in a family business such as a farm, or they held jobs but did not work due to illness, vacations, labor disputes, or bad weather. So in order to be considered part of the labor force and part of those people who are employed, you have to meet at least one of these criteria. So if you are 15 and you are employed, you are not included in this because it is 16 or older. And the reason for that is because different states have different requirements for when they consider people eligible to be able to work. And so since 16 is the minimum age across the board, that's the number that they go with. Unemployment also has a very specific definition. These are those who did not meet the previous requirements but have looked for a job within the past 4 weeks. Somebody is not considered unemployed or part of this unemployment number if they do not have a job and are not seeking a job. Only those who are actively looking for a job within the past 4 weeks would be considered part of unemployment and be counted as one of those numbers. In this way, sometimes statistics can be a bit misleading, where it might show that unemployment is really low, which is a good thing. It could also not be reflecting those who have been discouraged from looking for a job. And so in that sense, unemployment numbers may not be necessarily accurate for those who are capable of working, but just don't have a job right now. Okay, so how is the labor force tracked? And we see this through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They release information constantly about unemployment, usually monthly, to reflect the previous month. And so they answer things like how many people are in the labor force, how many are employed and unemployed at any given time. And these are the websites that you can go to look up these statistics. So this is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and here it tells you a lot of information. But if you look over here on the right-hand side, it tells us an employment rate, change in unemployment level, change in employment level, change in civilian labor force level, so on and so forth. And so this number reflects usually the previous month, so 8.4% for August of 2020. And so you can see it's the previous month's data, and this is a great place to look. It has been seasonally adjusted, and the reason for that is because obviously with different seasons, you may have different levels of employment. When it becomes the holidays, more people tend to be employed. So they're going to have to adjust for that as well when looking at that. Annual averages are here as well, so you can see unemployment rate for the year 2019 was at a 3.7%, and currently we are significantly higher than that number. And unemployment level is 6,001,000 for 2019. So that's the previous year. But there's a lot of other good information here, and so if you have a few minutes to kind of look through, or if you're just curious to know at any point what the unemployment rate is currently or for the previous month, this is going to be a good source for you. Okay. This is kind of the same thing. It just gets more into specific definitions and details about different economic indicators. And these are really what we look at to figure out if our economy is healthy or not. So another great resource to look at to figure out that information. All right, so some things we've noticed in occupational trends in recent years. There's definitely been a shift in the economy and trends over time. So things like a shift away from farming, then we saw it moving towards factories, and now we see things more kind of in this tech and cyber type of world. And so we can see these shifts taking place, some of which have happened even within our own lives, and this how this has changed employment and employment opportunities. So another thing that we have also experienced over time is that we in the United States especially are seeing fewer production of goods and more services available. So we have fewer jobs that deal with the manufacturing of and selling of goods, and we see more of these service-based jobs. So an example of that would be, people who used to farm and grow crops and sell those crops. Those were the goods that they would sell. Or working in a factory, if they worked in a textile factory, maybe they made cloth for clothing. But now we see more of these service jobs. So like a doctor, a plumber, a welder, things like that, things that they're not actually creating a product, they're providing a service. It does affect, or there are effects of international competition. And so we have seen this as well with the different debates that have happened in our country over what should happen with China and our connection financially with them. And the integrity of the inventions that we've created, especially those in technology. And if you are a business owner and you see that it is cheaper to run your business in another country, you may choose to take that route because, producers are motivated by profit. And so being able to move to another country in order to save money could be in your best interest. And so there's constant competition between the United States and other countries, trying to maintain business owners and trying to encourage them, if they have left, to return to the United States. Some of the things that drive costs are labor costs. We do have a minimum wage in the United States, which requires business owners to pay employees a certain amount of money. And other countries may not have a minimum wage, or they could possibly have a much lower minimum wage. And then finally, increased technology. So as we become more technological, other countries are also becoming more tech savvy. And because of this, they don't necessarily need as much of a workforce, and they're able to take that overseas more easily. We've also seen a change in people who are employed. So prior to World War II, many women really stayed in the home as housewives, and you can see that with this 1950s cartoon of this woman who's wearing heels and baking pies while her son is here looking on, and the men were the main workers there. But now we see women participating more in the economy, and we really see this shift, kind of start after World War II when the men returned from war, and then we see it continue to grow through the Vietnam era, and then even later into the 70s and 80s. And then finally, retirement. There are more safeguards for people who retire or maybe become injured or disabled, that there are protections there as a safety net to help those people who may need extra financial assistance when they are no longer able to work. So people don't have to work, as long as they used to, and there are some safety nets for them if something does happen. There's been an increase in college graduates. The learning effect is the theory that education increases productivity and results in higher wages. This is a theory. And one thing we need to mention too about theories is you can have so many people, in a certain field and having that education, but other fields or industries are also going to need employees, and they don't necessarily have to go through college to gain that skill. So education does not always mean college education. It could mean a trade education or a trade skill as well. So like I mentioned before, we see more women working. We do see some more temporary workers. So we do still see people who are working, particularly in the agricultural industry, who are there basically just for harvesting season or planting season, and then they move along to another industry or to another type or form of agriculture. You can see this as well when talking about the holidays. Sometimes people are looking for a job to make a little extra money around the holidays, and companies are looking for those employees to help, especially in retail. So some people are encouraged to work these temporary jobs, and the reasons for that are flexible work arrangements. They may be seasonal, so they're not having to do this all the time. Discharging temporary workers is easier than permanent workers because they do not receive severance. So the business owner might also like this temporary workers type of situation because they don't have to keep them around if things don't work out well. Temporary workers tend to be paid less with less benefits because they are not required to provide health insurance if they are not full-time. And some workers prefer temporary work. Most want a permanent job, but there are people out there who don't like to just stick with one thing.